but just putting it out there. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamshta Devapre Navabhakti Shasya Vitati Sanjivani Swagama Rambe Kamata Partudaha Damani Vishwa Pogolasini Duran me Marushakino Pisarasi Bhavaya Bhuya Prabhu Shri Chaitanya Kripa Nirankushamaha Madhurya Kadambini Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay, so let's finish up our study here of Madhurya Kadambini. Actually, we have the first shower to go to, but let's finish up the 8th shower. Sri Vishwanath here, having described the subjective experience of Prem rather elaborately, and what it's like to experience the darshan, the Lord, in the last passages that we covered. He gives a summation of the sequence of development of bhakti from Shraddha to Prema. So, and he describes that sequence in a couple of different ways. So that's what we're going to hear from him right now. So let us take a look here, what he has to say. Okay. So first there is faith. So this is him quoting Srila Rupa Goswami's verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu describing the sequence of the development of bhakti. So first there is faith, Shraddha, then one associates with saints, sadhu sangha. Then one engages in bhajana, bhajan kriya, anishita bhajan kriya. Then one becomes free from bad habits, anartha nivritti. Then one becomes fixed in bhajan, nishta. Then one attains deep taste, ruchi. Then one becomes attached to sakti, to the object of worship. Then one attains bhava, and then prema awakens. Thus, the scriptures have justly described the course of devotional progress. So this word here, justly. So we covered this in short earlier, but basically, for those who do offenseless bhajan, then there are only 2 stages. Chanting offenselessly and then attaining the Lord. These are the 2 stages if one does offenseless bhajan. But generally speaking, offenses are happening. There's no offenseless bhajan going on. So because of that, the description of bhakti in these several different stages is justly described. This is the import of the word justly described. Most people are not doing offenseless bhajan, worship of Krishna. So there's this whole journey that they have to go on. And that journey is summarized by Sri Rupa Goswami thus. Okay, that's that point. So above that means above prema, there are even more juicy fruits in the wish yielding vine of devotion, named Sneha, Man, Pranaya, Raga, Anuraga, and Mahabhava. This material body of the practitioner is unable to tolerate the heat, cold, or collisions of relishing this treasure. Therefore, they cannot possibly manifest in this body. For this reason, they have not been described here. So there are higher sthai bhavas, prema, sthai bhava, and then prema. And then after prema, there's all these other sthai bhavas, basically, with different names here and different effects. So the impact of those ecstasies are impossible to withstand in the material body. That's been told here. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if you study his Ansha Leela, especially when he was in Gambhira, you'll hear some of the most amazing descriptions. It may not strike you as amazing. It may strike you as kind of horrific, but you'll hear these ecstasies of Mahaprabhu, and Puri, where he would, like, for example, he would jump in the air and all his limbs would become detached from their sockets. And when he would land on the ground, his body would be like 18 feet long, with the limbs simply being held together by the skin. You remember this description of Anchalila? Sometimes he would perspire blood in ecstasy. Or sometimes his limbs would retract into the body, so he looked like a tortoise. If you read Chaitanya Charitamrita Anchalila, all these descriptions are given there. And of course, when you first encounter them, like I said, it may strike you as more horrific than amazing. But these are due to the higher ecstasies. So can you imagine if your physical body was going through something like that? It is not possible. I think in Christian religion, Catholicism, they have this thing that was there called stigmata. Stigmata. The stigmata means basically a follower of Jesus. I think it was said to first manifest in Saint Francis of Assisi. He was so absorbed in Jesus, he attained tadatmya. So this word, we've mentioned this word a few times in the course of our presentation, tadatmya. It means basically when two objects become like one. So like the example is the iron rod and fire. They attain tadatmya sambandha when you stick the iron rod in fire. So you'll see this word a lot. If you study, now it's Kartik Masa starting today. And today is Sharat Purnima, where Krishna is called the gopis for Maharasa. So one can read Rasa Panchadhyaya this month. It's a very wonderful pastime. If you study chapter 30, after Krishna is disappearing and the gopis are looking for Krishna, and then a word that is used constantly throughout that chapter is tadatmya. This word is used so many times in that particular chapter. They would become so absorbed in Krishna that they would actually think they were Krishna, and they would perform Krishna's leelas with sort of the self-concept that they were Krishna. So absorbed they were in his devotion. So Saint Francis of Assisi also, apparently he attained this tadatmya with Jesus Christ. And so absorbed he was in the remembrance of Jesus that, when Jesus was being crucified, by this sort of mystic empathy, he was experiencing vicariously all the things that were happening to Jesus, and it was manifesting on his body, happening to Jesus during the crucifixion. So it would manifest on his body, like where Jesus was nailed on his body, it would manifest on Saint Francis' body. This thing is called stigmata. I don't know if you ever heard of this. I remember growing up as a young child and watching a movie called Stigmata. That's how I first became acquainted with this. Anyway, so the Lord is absorbed in the ecstasies of Srimati Radhika. He has like tadatmya sambandha, basically. So all these ecstasies of love he experiences, Mahaprabhu was experiencing, and they're powerful transformations on the body. Sometimes Mahaprabhu, when he would be in kirtan, he would jump up in the air and he would crash down on the earth so forcibly that the devotees would thought he just died because of the force in which he would crash from the body. So these are all the different ecstasies. Possible, but not with the material body. If you have a material body, you do like this, you'll be finished immediately. So Sri Vishwanath is telling that these higher ecstasies are not experienced with this body. One needs to get this siddhadeha, the spiritual body, to host these higher level ecstasies. Hold on, I just need to chart. Oh my God. So, okay. There's a last little thing on this. I remember once being in Chicago. We recite the Shishashtakam prayers often in the morning in a lot of our temples. So there's this one line coming in the first stanza, Anandam Bhutivardhana, which means that the Ananda is ever expanding. So one of our guys at the time who was living in the temple, he was like an impersonalist. Even when he was living in the ashram, he was like a full-blown impersonalist. He was attracted to impersonal philosophy. And so he He came to me one day and was like, "Oh, I have a doubt." And I said, "What is the doubt?" He said this line, "Anandam Buddhi Vardhana," that the bliss is just ever expanding. And immediately I can understand what direction he was going. And I was like, "You're thinking that, the bliss is like so heavy. You're just like, and the body just explodes." And he started laughing. He said, "That's exactly what I'm thinking." Like, that's exactly what I'm imagining. So yes, it is true that Ananda is ever expanding, but the material body won't be able to hold that expansion or the experience. So Sri Vishwanath is making that comment here. We could discuss it, but it's not so relevant for us right now, so we'll just skip it. Okay, next point he makes. In this treatise, the ascertainment of stages like Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, and Prema, and their direct experience have been described, right? Although there is sufficient evidence on this, they have not been mentioned here. Although dependence on scriptural evidence makes the path of direct experience harsh, still, in case someone may depend or rely on evidence, it is given below. So I'm not going to read through all these statements here, but basically, he's given an explanation of the subjective experience of these higher stages of sadhana bhakti, nishta, ruchi, asakti, bhava, and prema. So because it's a subjective experience, someone will say, how do I know this is true? That is a natural question. Everyone coming forward and saying they experienced so many things, right? Just like Prabhupada, one hippie girl said, "Prabhupada, when I chant Hare Krishna, I see red lights." So it's a subjective experience. And maybe she has seen the red lights also. And Prabhupada's response to that was, "Don't worry, keep chanting, it will go away." So he didn't give much value to that subjective experience. But you can't really deny someone who's claiming a certain experience. So naturally the question comes, how do I know that is true? That is always going to be the question. So many things are going on in the world today, and everyone is claiming that this is fake and that is fake. So how do you know what is true? This is a natural question. It's called epistemology. How do you know what you know, first of all, and how do you know that what you know is actually the truth? Especially when you're dealing in the realm of subjectivity. Anyone can say anything. I was living with a devotee in the ashram for 1 year. He was clinically schizophrenic. None of us knew it. I knew he was crazy from the outset, but I didn't know he was like clinically diagnosed with schizophrenia. So he stopped taking his medicine when he moved into the temple, which is a very classic Hare Krishna attracted. Somehow the crazies get attracted. Many times he would come to me and say, "Jaya, I think I'm experiencing prema." Many times, not once or twice, many times he would come to me, "I think I'm experiencing prema." And then he would describe his subjective experience. I would just be like, "All right, homie, whatever." I mean, I can't deny you your experience. I don't know what's going on inside. Well, how do I know something is true? So for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, our general standard for understanding the truth of something is Shastra Praman, Shabda Praman, right? That is our general standard for understanding the truth of something. We look to the Shabda. So when everyone, especially particularly in matters of transcendence, when you're dealing with the material world, pratyaksha, which means the direct central perception, and I don't mean looking through a screen. That is not direct central perception. That is still abstract perception. It's apart from the direct object. But sense perception means like, pratyaksha means right before your eyes. And anuman means a logical deduction, which is also based on pratyaksha. So in the empirical world, pratyaksha and anuman do have a strong role to play. But in transcendence, pratyaksha and anuman have no standing whatsoever. So in the matters of transcendence, and transcendence, the subjective experience of transcendence is part of that conversation, then one has to quote Shastra Praman. That is a general standard. And the acharyas, guru and sadhu, they will give explanations that help to reveal what the Shastra is saying. In other words, their commentary should not muddy what the Shastra is directly saying. Anyway, I shouldn't go into this too much, but just like when Mahaprabhu had conversation with the sannyasis of Benares or Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, his main criticism to them is that they give commentary on Shastra that covers the self-evident meaning of what the Shastra is saying. the mukhya vritti. Mukhya vritti means the primary meaning of words. So just like if suppose you're taking prasadam and you're standing in front of the puris and you say, can I get 2 puris, please? Because usually the puris are a little bit small. So you want at least 2, maybe sometimes up to 4, at least for starters. So you ask, can I get 2 puris? Now, obviously you mean something very self-evident. If we take the mukhya vritti of what the word puri means. But someone says, well, the word puri, they give some other explanation. The word puri means city. And what you're actually asking about is the purusha, the purusha who is inside the material body or the city of the material body. They start giving some other explanation. Then it covers the direct meaning of, no, I'm standing in front of the puris. I want 2 of them. Can you please give them to me? So Maharu gave this criticism to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and the sannyasis that you give explanations that cover the self-evident meaning of Shastra. Because you don't like to take the mukhya vritti, the primary meaning of the words. So when Shastra is quoted, Shastra is our basis for understanding the transcendence. And the commentaries of Guru and Sadhu are simply meant to shine light on what the Shastra is supposed to be self-evidently pointing out. You understand? But the Shastra is the center of what sadhus and gurus should be speaking, at least in Gaudiya, in Vedanta in general, and Gaudiya Vaishnavism specifically. The only thing is, when you're talking about subjective experience, if you keep quoting so many shlokas, it makes the discussion very rough. That's what Sri Vishwanath is saying here. It becomes very harsh if you have to give evidence for every little thing that you're experiencing. You know, you're having this profound subjective experience. That's true. Let's just take it for granted. It's a true experience. And you're trying to describe in someone that, where is evidence for this experience? Where is evidence for that? Someone keeps asking, especially when they have doubt on you, they'll ask this question. You don't hear many people asking, you don't hear Prabhupada's disciples asking Prabhupada if he saw Krishna, right? Prabhupada, are you actually seeing Krishna? That question never comes up from a disciple. But many times the interviewers will ask this question, or people who had doubt on Prabhupada's divinity, they would ask this question. But the disciples don't ask. For them, it is self-evident. They take it for granted that Prabhupada is, self-reliant. There's no question of asking him this thing. So when people have doubt on you, they ask this question: where is the pramana for this? Where is the pramana for that? But if you have to keep quoting pramanas to explain your subjective experience, then it makes the talking about it very rough and not a very smooth conversation. So Sri Vishwanath is saying this particular point here, that actually I just talked about the subjective experience without quoting statements that justified it, because I want to get a smooth, I want to hear a smooth description of that subjective experience by which they could judge for themselves where they're at or what is their prospect in devotion. But I know there's a whole bunch of you out there that require that. You will have so many doubts on what I have spoken. You are vichara pradhan. We heard these terms earlier also, vichara pradhan, ruchi pradhan. Vichara pradhan means that a person is primarily or predominantly dependent on like shastra, intellect. Shastric yukti is like super duper important for such a person, sadhaka. Then there's another person who's ruchi pradhan. That means he has taste for hearing Krishna. So he can just hear Krishna. He doesn't require so much evidence for this and evidence for that and quotes for this and quotes for that. He just likes to hear Krishna. Like if you go to Braj and you see some of these Brijvasis and you go and try to explain to them the evidence for Krishna, they don't care about that. Very like, what are you talking? Just tell the pastime, homie. Why are you going into all these shlokas for justifying? Just tell the story. We just want to hear Krishna's story. It's called ruchi pradhan. They have predominance of ruchi, so they like to hear it. But for those who don't have that ruchi, they haven't awakened ruchi yet. So for them, they like the philosophical points, get into the details. And the intellect is, the intellect gets its sense gratification. I mentioned this before from taxonomy, breaking things down and categorizing them in subsections and subsections of those subsections. intelligence gets like a lot of gratification for being able to do that. It gives a sense of controlling agency there. So that is okay. There is no fault there also per se. So we're vicharpradhan. But Sri Vishwanath saying, I wanted to describe a smooth, I wanted you to get a smooth experience of the subjective nature of these states of development in bhakti. But for those who require, here's some Shastra Pramad for you. So he's quoting so many verses here, justifying the experiences that he talked about earlier without quoting them. That's this last little piece here. Okay, so moving on. So his final conclusions in this shower in the book is a discussion of the sequence in terms of the transformation of one's I and mind. And the final statement is a discussion of the sequence in terms of the transformation of your contemplative life. I'll come back to that point just at the end. So let's look at here, sequence in terms of the transformation of I and mind. So let us read it here. Its principle being the principle of development in bhakti, is as follows. Ahankara has two aspects, ahankta and mamata, I and mine. They disappear through the development of spiritual knowledge. The word used for knowledge is gyan. Gyan here means knowledge, or gyan means awareness, when your awareness is expanding. So then I and mine connected to the body is dissipated. Okay. Then the conditioned soul attains moksha, liberation. If he is situated in a life centered around his body and house, he is conditioned. Okay. So those are the two poles, you can say, in this polarity. The one pole is you're spiritually aware, so you don't have any material I and mind, you attain moksha. On the other end is dehatma buddhi. Your I and mind is fixed in the body, and family and other things connect to the body. So as you move from one pole to the other, there's a dissipation or expansion that takes place. So that's what he wants to describe here. You'll see what I mean by that. So here, I belong to the Lord. I am his servant. The Lord with his associates, his form and qualities, is an ocean of transcendental sweetness. The Lord is my worshipable person and the object of my service. In this way, he identifies himself, I, ahamta, with the associates of the Lord, and he considers the form of the Lord the object of his possession, mamata. This is called prema. Actually, prema is far more wonderful than either bondage or liberation, and hence it was given the title, Purushartha Shiromani, the crushed jewel of all human pursuits. Okay. I think that should be clear. All right, so now he wants to talk about this development here, which is nice. So you may have remembered this, putting it out here now, before we read the description. When describing the anartha nivritti, the nullification of anarthas, he mentioned that there were 5 types of nullification. You remember this? I'm going to send the questionnaire, hopefully today. If not today, I'm going to send it tomorrow morning. And I want to send it by tonight so you have time to look at it and come up with some answers, and we'll go through it together. But anyway, we discussed anartha nivritti. 5 types are there. You remember 5 types of anartha nivritti. And there were some technical terms used there also, right? Ekadesha vyapani, bahudesha vyapani, prayiki, purna, atyantiki. These were the 5 terms that we're using. Ekadesha means a little bit destroyed. Bahudesha means pervasively destroyed. Prayiki means almost completely destroyed. Purna means completely destroyed, but with some chance of it returning. And atyantiki means absolutely destroyed with no chance of returning. You remember these terms? So now he's going to describe the development, the sequence of bhakti in terms of the destruction of the material I and mind, so the nullification of the material I and mind. And he's going to use these same terms that he used in the anartha nivritti, and the expansion of the spiritual I and mind in reverse. So what I mean by in reverse is that if your material identity is atyantiki, absolute, when you have no spiritual knowledge, right? When you have no spiritual knowledge, your identity with the material dehatma buddhi is atyantiki, absolute. right? And then as you make spiritual advancement, it goes from absolute to purna, complete, to almost to bahu, to ekadesha, and then to almost, just ascent, and then to completely eradicate it. So this is what's happening to your dehatma buddhi. And your spiritual thing, when you're a materialist, then there's not even a scent of spirituality there. Then there's a scent of it, then it's a little bit, then it's bahu desha, then it's almost complete, like this. So it's like this, I don't know I'm trying to describe it, but I think my hands movements are going to have to do the work that I can't do with my words right now. So the material thing is getting destroyed and the spiritual thing is elevating. This is what's going on here. So it's like a reversal. You'll see in the language how it's being used there. Let's read it. I hope I didn't do the best job, and I should have sat with it a little bit more, but because I already had looked at it yesterday, I didn't study it this morning, and I kind of was like, I should look at this a little bit more, because I like to find precision and articulation that wasn't totally precise. But I think you get what I'm saying here. Let's read it and iron it out a little bit. So its course of development is as follows. When self-identification and possessiveness in its mundane sense are still very strong, one thinks, I'm in material life, but let me become a Vaishnava, and let the Lord become the object of my service. So when by good luck, a drop of such faith is born, he becomes eligible for devotion, because now he has a whiff. Paramartikatva ganda. The word ganda means like a scent. He has a whiff of spirituality. All right. So when you first start bhakti, you get faith. Then there's a little, okay, there's a scent there that, oh, this guy wants to be a devotee. He's mostly a materialist, but he thinks, let me be a Vaishnava, let me chant Hare Krishna. All right, there's the scent of parimartikatva. The paramartha is there. Then when he starts associating with saints, this whiff of spirituality becomes more substantial. Paramartikatva khandasya sandratvam. So this is a condensation of the whiff. I have this, this is such a crude example in my head, but I've shared this before. In New York, many times it happens that I would be on Harinam, for example, we'd be on Harinam, and then when we were going home from the Harinam, we're going home in the evening, so the trains are completely packed. And it would happen sometimes that there would be one car of the train that was completely empty during like rush hour. So all the devotees would be like, wow, Krishna's really showing some kindness to us. There's a car that's completely empty. And so we would get on the car, and then the doors would close, the train would pull off. And suddenly there was like a whiff. Little whiff. What is that? A whiff. Scent's coming. And then because we were a little bit longer there, then it would get sandartram, it would get condensed. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, what's going on? It's very, and then we would look down at the end of the car, there would be like this homeless guy who was smelling so bad so that no one would be on the train. Anyway, a crude example, but it's kind of funny. Anyway, so same is happening. It's not same, I'm making it parallel here. When you first start bhakti, there's a little bit of whiff of spirituality, so your parents aren't alerted to it. But then when you do sadhu sangha, that whiff becomes stronger, and then your parents become concerned. This is the experience. Every devotee's had this experience. You're like, yeah, I'm kind of into this Krishna thing. Okay, it's a whiff there, and the parents aren't so concerned about it. But then you do sadhu sangha, and that scent becomes like permanently on you. Then the parents are like, what is this nonsense? They start looking up ISKCON or whatever on the computer. They want to show you so much evidence why this is dangerous for you and so on. So, but it's still just a whiff. You're still like a materialist, but you're doing sadhu sangha, so the scent has become strong. All right. So after this sadhu sangha, unstable engagement in bhajan commences. So this is Anishita Bhajan Kriya starts. In this stage, both self-identification and possessiveness are minimum in the spiritual sense. So when you do Anishita Bhajan Kriya, so he's using here this word Ekadesha Vyapani. Ekadesha Vyapani means there's a little bit substantiation of the spiritual I am I, but still your material identification is purna. That's what he used, and maximum in the mundane sense. You still have a pretty solid, you still look at yourself as like, for example, I'm Jaya, I'm a black guy, I'm this, I'm that. That's complete. But there is a substantiation of the spiritual I am I. I'm a devotee of Krishna. That is also very there. And sometimes you feel a tension between that solid, complete I, which is the body, and your spiritual identity, which is becoming substantiated, right? When it was just a whiff, there was no tension, right? When you were just starting to associate with devotees, there was no tension between these two self-notions. You can smoke weed and then come to kirtan right afterwards. I was just with a friend the other day. He told me that. He said, I would come to kirtan blazed so many times. But then after I started associating with devotees more, and then I decided this was going to be my path, and I started practicing it, I couldn't do that anymore, right? So why you couldn't do it anymore? Because there was a tension between this new I that was being substantiated and my material I, which is like very solid, right? So I'm just giving you a sense of how this plays out psychologically in our experience. Okay. So when one becomes fixed in bhajan, so this is nishta, that means you've overgone the arnata nivritti, one's consciousness becomes pervaded with spirituality. I'll highlight the sentence as you're losing. One's consciousness becomes pervaded with spirituality. So bahu desha vyapini. So that means the spiritual I and mind becomes quite comprehensive, right? That is the difference between ekadesha and bahudesha. So ekadesha means, remember the example given with this in the Anartha Nivritti chapter? Ekadesha means like when you first begin to tear a cloth, you tear it from a particular point. And then when you're torn it quite a bit, that's called bahudesha, right? This is the example that was given by Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. If you have to tear the cloth, you start from a particular location and you just rip it a little bit. So that's called ekadesha vyapani. And then when you've ripped it quite a bit, that's called bahudesha vyapani. And when you've almost completely ripped it toward the end of it, that's called prayiki. You understand this development here? So your spirituality is substantiated a little bit at Anishita Bhajan Kriya. It's like you've ripped the material I and mind. And you've ripped it comprehensively at the stage of Nishta, right? That's what he's saying here. And the mundane influence becomes prayiki, almost destroyed, like almost completely gone. Your mundane I and mind. So you're the substantiation of the spiritual ego. When it becomes pervasive, there's almost destruction of the material I. Okay. When ruchi emerges, the heart becomes fully engrossed in spirituality. Prayiki. And the mundane influence becomes minimum, ekadesha vyapani. So at ruchi, the spiritual substantiation is almost complete. That is why ruchi bhakti and asakti, well, he's going to talk about asakti. But in ruchi bhakti, that is really the platform in which one can start to gain insight inspired by a divinely inspired intelligence, as we mentioned in our discussion on ruchi, about the siddha deha or the siddha rupa. These sort of things become very important for you at the stage of ruchi. Before the stage of ruchi, because the material identity is so strong, if you hear the topic about the spiritual body, no interest. But when you come to ruchi, then because your spiritual I is very substantiated, then your whole life is going to revolve around that, actually. And the mundane influence becomes minimal, right? People are talking about material things and okay, whatever, not so interested. When a sakti is born, spirituality becomes intense, purna, and the mundane influence is reduced to a whiff. Then when bhava arises, spirituality is overwhelming, atyantiki, and mundane influence is reduced to a mere shadow, apasa, like a dream just dreamt. When prema is born, self-identification and possessiveness are most overwhelming, parama atyantiki, in the spiritual realm, and have fully lost their relationship with the mundane aspect. So we heard about that yesterday with Mahaprabhu. So I don't know, I'm going back to my little hand movements. You can see that the whole process was like this. And the same terms were used to describe either the evolution or the dissolution of one of the eyes, right? The same terms, Ekadesha Vyapani, Bahudesha Vyapani, Prayiki, Purna, etc. Both terms were used to describe both the evolution and the dissolution of the spiritual eye and material eye, respectively. So I'm going to put that as a question, just so I didn't do the best job of articulating it, so I do apologize for that, but I think you understand what's going on here. You can ask questions about it if you have them to suss it out more. But I asked a question about that just so you are forced to engage with that as a concept and, sit and integrate it. Last little point here, he talks about the sequence of development in terms of what happens to your contemplative life. So spiritual life at the end of the day is what's really going on. And you can call it the world of contemplation or your meditational absorption. This is another way of looking at the transformation of your spirituality. What happens to your mental world, right? The topmost confidential instruction of Gita, Mamanda Bhava Ma Bhakto Mam Yaji Mam Namaskuru. So you're supposed to think of me as a devotee, Krishna says. So what's going on in your contemplative life when you do bhajan? So what happens there is also an indicator of the nature of the development of your bhakti. So this is his final statement in the book, actually. He says, when thus bhajan kriya commences, one meditates on the Lord while there is only a momentary whiff left over of other topics. Bantantara Gandhi. I feel like this was translated in two different ways. Anyway, so you do bhajan kriya, and there's Gandhi. Vantantara Gandhi means there's scent of other topics, either in your mind or also in your speech, right? Many times people chant japa. In the middle of the japa, they go and have a conversation about something mundane. Or if you're not having a conversation, you're thinking about something mundane. You just saw some nice show that was funny. You start japa, you remember one of the jokes, you start laughing while japa is going on. So that is called Varta. Varta means the material topics. Varta Gandhi. When Nisha comes to being, other topics are only just a shadow. So that means, right, because Nisha was described earlier as the engagement in bhajan without distraction. So it's just like a shadow. It's coming up. When Ruchi awakens, this meditation is devoid of ulterior subjects. Vantantra rahita. So in Ruchi, there's no question in the material subjects entering the mind. That's why some of our acharyas, like Thakur Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says this Ruchi state is where Shuddha Bhakti really begins. That the sort of full development of the Anyabhilashita Shunyam. This is just I wouldn't say a suggestion, but I'm going to say, I'm pretty sure this is Thakur Bhaktivinoda, but because I can't draw you right to a particular statement, I just know from how I've read him that pure bhakti, and because Shuddha Bhakti has three stages of development, right? Sadhana, Bhava, and Prema. But at what stage of sadhana is bhakti Shuddha? You guys are doing sadhana also. Do you feel like Shuddha Bhaktas? You feel like Shuddha Bhaktas? So at what stage of sadhana bhakti does bhakti become Shuddha? So from how I've read Thakur Bhaktivinoda, it's the stage of Ruchi. So this is giving some evidence of this also. Varntantara rahita. And yeah, so when Ruchi awakens, his meditation is devoid of ulterior subjects and lasts for long periods. In the stage of Asakti, this meditation is very deep, Ati Sandram. In Bhava, there is mere meditation and the Lord appears in a vision, Bhagavat Spurti. In Prema, these visions become detailed and the true vision of the Lord takes place. So that is another way of thinking about the development of the bhakti. Okay. So this is the 8th shower. We do have 1 shower left to go, but I'm answering questions for, this is the main part I wanted to study. The first shower is quite technical. Okay. And also important and interesting, but this is the main part I wanted to study together. It's good to know. It's important to know for every sadhaka. Okay, just for the whole group's knowledge, Hari Parsha Prabhu was speaking on Rasa Panchadhyaya on our GBC SBT channel. I will share the links to everyone to follow. Very excited. When is he doing that? Like today?
Prabhu, no. I'll let you know at the exact dates.
Okay.
I'll.
Awesome sauce. Makona, these terms refer to how anarthas are relinquished to different degrees depending on what stage you are at between Shraddha and Prema, correct? Right. So, but they were also being used to describe the evolution of the spiritual I and mind also. So he used it in both ways in this last description. But how we first encountered it was in terms of the destruction or dissolution of anarthas. But he also was using it to describe the evolution of the spiritual I. So in the beginning, there's a scent, then the scent becomes more condensed when you do sadhu sangha, and then it becomes eka desha vyapani. So that means you've really made a rip in the material I, so to speak, or you've really made some progress in the substantiation of the spiritual I. Bahudesha Varpani happens at Nishta, so it's the spiritual substantiation is comprehensive. It's almost complete at the stage of Ruchi. It's complete like this at the stage of Asakti. It's Atyantiki at the stage of Bhava, and Parama Antiki, he gives an extra term there, Parama Atyantiki at the stage of Prema. So these terms were used to describe the evolution of the spiritual I in this last section. Got the dates here in the chat box. Okay. Any final questions or comments? It is Kartik today, the first day of Kartik, I should say rather. Kartik, I'm going to send a link for all the duties that are supposed to be followed for Kartik. The basic idea here is that it's a month of Radharani. It's also known as Urja Vrat. So the word Urja means the Shakti of the Lord, Srimati Radhika. Urja Vrat means Radharani Vrat. So one is taking the vows in order to please Srimati Radhika. So the vows can be very personal. There are certain duties that are expected of us, like chanting the Damodar Ashtakam every day, following Akadashi, the 2 Akadashis kind of very seriously, even doing the fast if possible for you on those days. You want to make some offering to the Lord, some offering of rounds of how much Harikatha you will do, how many obeisances you will do. And one of them, you can say more important vows is a vow to reduce sense gratification for the month. And you have the rest of the year to do sense gratification. So there's prayers there from Lochan Das Thakur, Parama Karuna, Nitai Gora Chandra is praying to Nitai Gora. At the end of the prayer, he's saying that you're so merciful, but I'm trapped in sense gratification. Therefore, I'm not able to catch the mercy. Right? So mercy is raining down on us, but we're so busy chasing sense objects that we just don't catch the mercy. So anyway, that is what to do. Our material I is Atyantiki. Okay, we're sadhaka, so let's be fair. It's Purna, it's complete. So we're after the sense objects. That is a natural thing. But here we're still Krishna's bhaktas. Even if we are materialists largely, we're still his bhaktas. So this month is very dear to him. In fact, if we don't follow this month, there's one shloka here in the Hari Bhakti Vilas and some of the links that I will send. He says, for anyone who doesn't follow this month, then he becomes against them. Because this month is so dear to him and you're not honoring it, you don't show honor. So he becomes against them. Why is this month so dear to him? Because this is Radharani's month. And she is so dear to him. So it's like not honoring her also. So he becomes against such persons. How can you be called Vaishnava if you don't follow Kartik? So some statements are coming up like that also. So out of all the ruts that we take, and it should be something that you can definitely keep up, come hell or high water, as the saying goes. I will do this thing. I will offer a lamp. I will sing Damodar Ashtakam prayers. I will chant this many rounds, offer this many obeisances, whatever it may be. But also we should not do the sense gratification. Not do the sense means we should reduce it tremendously. The sort of normal activities like, okay, I'm not going to watch movies this month. I'm not going to, celibacy is a offering that usually happens for many programs during this month. I was reading Srila Narayan Maharaj's one talk he gave at the beginning of Kartik in Mathura. And he was saying that he was telling all the followers there, do not look for a husband and wife during this month. And then he told some of the leading disciples, he said, make sure you take care of these ladies. They should not be looking for husbands during this month. He said, don't do it because, how did he put it? Because it will displease me. That's how he put it. Because they're attached to him as guru. So he said, it will displease me if you go around looking. He said, you have the rest of the year to do that. Don't do it during this particular month. So that should be part of our vow taking, that, all right, you know what? I'm going to really reduce the sense gratification as far as possible. Obviously, we're going to enjoy sense gratification. We're going to eat nice things, this, that, and the other, but I'll follow Akadashi. I'll not, the sort of wild sense gratification I'm doing on the daily, I'm going to cut that out for this month as an offering to Radharani. And then we should also, at the beginning of the month, you should take you will have something that you need, some miracle in your spiritual life that you require, that you can't get by yourself, that only God or help from above can satisfy. So you should have some prayer in your heart for the whole month like that. Some prayer for some miracle to happen in your spiritual life. I would say a measured miracle. Don't say like at the end of this month, I should understand what my Siddha Rupa is. It's like, honey, you're doing sense gratification the whole day. It's a little bit of a leap there. Keep it measured. Keep it measured. What do you need from where you're standing now? What sort of miracle would you require to really make a breakthrough in your spirituality? And you should hold that prayer in your heart for the whole month. Don't tell it to anyone. It's between you and our Lord and Lady. And and you hold that in your heart for the whole month, and Krishna can reciprocate with that in response to the way that you're performing your vows. So you're performing your vows with that prayer in your heart and allowing Krishna to see that you're serious about that breakthrough. And he can reciprocate by the end of the month. It's totally possible if we're sincere in how we follow our vratas. So I'll send some links. There much more could be said, but I'll send some links so you could just read it for yourself. It's inspiring. But I would say this is something that I'm going to try to do, and which I am also meditating on. So I wanted to share that. This is our chance. I wrote something on Facebook last night. I hardly go on Facebook anymore because it's just way too toxic, but I do go in there just to post my like arise stuff, and then I don't check it though. But yesterday I just wrote something that if this was your last Kartik, and a few devotees they like, Prabhu, are you okay? I'm like, God, try to catch the spirit of things. I hate the internet, dude. It's just too impersonal. But I was like, if this was our last Kartik, because the world is becoming so incredibly unstable, how do we know what's going to happen in the future? So embracing the spirit of Parikshit Maharaj, I have 7 days to live, that sort of spirit, that what if this was my last Kartik? And therefore this is my last opportunity to really show Krishna that I am interested in being a devotee. Maybe I'm not the best devotee because my material identity is quite complete, but I'm still your devotee. And this is my last chance to really show Krishna like, hey, you know what? I'm going to just stop this, that, and another thing. And I'm going to show you that I'm your devotee. I want to be your devotee. And I need this sort of breakthrough in my life. And I'm going to perform my vratas, my prayer life for this month with that spirit, that this might be my last Kartik, because who knows what the future is holding for the world even. It's so incredibly unstable. You know, it won't be like such a big leap to say that the world just jumps into total chaos. It's like not such a big leap anymore. So in that sort of spirit, you know, conducting Kartik. Someone asked me this very question yesterday, so that's why I shared it on my Facebook. I was like, wow, this is a very interesting question to sit with. So good luck to us all. Yeah. Got the alley and Krishna Balaram Mandir is most active during Kartik. Unfortunately. Yeah, they call it Prem Gali, the alley of love, because during Kartik, all the young kids go there and try to find, you know, husbands and wives and other things. Okay, good luck. And if there are any more questions, then we'll stop here for today. And, you know, happy Kartik. Radha Damodar. Radha. Shri Madhurya Kadambini ki jai. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Shri Gaudiya Guru Varga ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo. Later, fam.